I wanted to welcome everyone to the first meeting in 2021 uh, with the devotional program focusing on race unity. Over as we started this, I think like back in July, and we took a short break during the holiday time because everybody was busy with the holiday activities. So we're happy to see everyone again. And so this meeting for folks who are joining in for the first time. So I think Kelly and Samantha, I think you this first time, right? You're joining in. Welcome. And this is held every 2 weeks. As you're available, feel free to join us. It's very open conversation. We start with different quotes or prayers or writings from or anything inspirational that we want to share, or music. And then this year we're actually going to focus a little bit more on the conversation on the race unity. I think, having said that, I think we can probably get started. So Aaron, should we just open the floor here for if anybody wants to share anything?
Yeah, I think we could. Should I put the screen up now with the?
Yeah, I think that's
the document.
Good. Yeah.
All right.
Hey, Shonda, I thought Sunil mentioned there was going to be a little opening discussion about open space. Is that right?
Right up here.
All right, great. Awesome.
So we've done the 15-minute greeting, and we're going into the devotional part now. And then we'll have maybe Francine will help guide us through a note about how to have a conversation, holding space. And then we'll start reading the quotations, and then have conversation after that.
All right, so we can probably get started, but I just wanted to welcome Elena. Welcome, Elena. How are you? All right. I think that there's somebody with moto. That might be Gloria. I'm not sure. Welcome. Sometimes it's hard to tell. I'm looking at the participant list. So Aaron, do we want to start the quote, or the quote is part of the
It's part of the devotional.
Part of the devotional, right? Okay.
Yeah. So, and there are several quotes, but we'll just use maybe 5 or 6 of them. One of them is quote number 2 is from the Bible, so it lists the verses. So those aren't the quote numbers; those are the verses from the Bible. And then there's the third quote, and we'll maybe try and get in 4 or 5 of them.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe how we can get started is, this is very open. This is not only the quotes that we can share. If there's something that you want to share, that's that you would like to, you're always welcome to share.
Yeah,
that.
You can interject something between the numbered quotes that we have here.
Yeah. So maybe if I could, ask for volunteers. You don't have to raise your hand or anything. Please jump in, and then maybe we can start reading these quotes and maybe ponder on them a little bit, think about it, or move into the next quote. Either way, that works.
Right.
So does anybody would like to start quote 1?
I can read it. I can read quote number 1. Do you want to start that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Racism is a profound deviation from the standard of true morality. It deprives a portion of humanity the opportunity to cultivate and express the full range of their capability and to live a meaningful and flourishing life while blinding the progress of the rest of humankind. It cannot be rooted out of contest and conflict. I can respond as he does. Bring a great deal of reflection, promotes reflection, I would say, particularly around the portion of humanity, depriving the portion of humanity the opportunity. And for me, opportunity is key. Opportunity that begins particularly in the educational world through our schools and the learning opportunities that children need to have regardless of their zip code, as we often reference. Therefore, there has to be a concerted effort, I am going to say, to ensure that everyone avails themselves of the learning opportunities that will bring about a successful and flourishing life for everyone, regardless, once again, of where the children and families live. And therefore, there's a great deal of educating in probably financial support for those initiatives as well. But I think it's critical to begin with education at an early age.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing. I really appreciate your outlook, and I agree. But before we move on to the next quote, because I feel like now we're entering a space where we're being asked to read the quotes and then reflect on it. But I think before we do that, I think it would help to read the note on holding space so people can think about holding, space for others so people can share comfortably. So can you please click that link that says a note? And this was inspired by an earlier conversation that we all had. Every morning we have prayer devotionals hosted by Sunil. And I shared with him this really great essay that talks about how to hold space. And I think it'd be great if we could all take turns. Whoever feels inspired to do so, they can read one bulletin point after the other. So anybody who would like to start with reading the first one, you're more than welcome to go.
I'll start.
Thank you.
To hold space for others to express their ideas, beliefs, first let go of the need to assert.
Instead of just penetrating the space with your ideas, beliefs, etc., be willing to step back and hold space for all those around you.
Holding space inspires others to express themselves by being willing to fully receive them.
It is full presence and unconditional attention, an opening for another person's expression without any agenda about what that expression should be. It is powerful because it can bring out in others what otherwise would always choose to remain silent.
It's about creating a strong and safe container for others to express themselves. Holding space is the ability to give space for any opinions, including those that are in opposition to yours.
Show up fully and bring your full attention to another person, but without an agenda of how they should react.
If someone has ever held space for you, you will recognize the natural response, which is spontaneous, authentic expression.
Thank you so much, everyone, for reading that. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add or any takeaways?
I just wanted to ask, was this shared with us in one of the emails from Sunil? And if not, could you share this? I want to send it to my staff.
Absolutely. I think Sunil shared the agenda for today, and this is one of those links that are included in the agenda. We can definitely resend it in a separate email too, if that helps as well. But really, thank you everyone for reading that. I think it's really important to keep that in mind, especially if we think about like building race unity and stamping out racism, like thinking about it in terms of a disease. If we can't talk openly about it or how it shows up in our own lives, then it's hard to, root it out. So I hope that, like I really do honor and I really respect and look up to everyone that's in this call right now. The fact that you're willing to have this conversation is amazing because there's a lot of people out there who are abiding by ignorance, whereas we're trying to look at higher reason and how to like have that inform our actions moving forward. So I really do look up to like what everyone else has going on right now, whether it's the programs or groups that we've started. I know Ali started like a diversity club. Is it in your high school or your college?
High school, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I really look up to people who have done work like that. And I know, Leslie, you've done work in your own community. Like each of us has done so much. So to like have this conversation to help us, communicate our frustrations or our celebrations around it, is really great. So hopefully moving forward, we can see what that looks like and hold space for everyone. So with that being said, I hold space for anyone else who would like to chime in. If everyone is still in a reflective mode, I'd like to sing a song. And Aaron, can you sing along with me?
Yes.
Thank you. Oh Lord, my God.
Oh Lord, my God.
Open thou the door.
Open thou the door.
Provide the means.
Provide the means.
Make safe the path.
Make safe the path.
And guide our way.
And guide our way.
For verily thou art.
For verily thou art.
The help in peril.
The help in peril.
The self-subsisting.
The self-subsisting.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Oh Lord, my God.
O Lord, my God.
Open thou the door.
Open thou the door.
Provide the means.
Provide the means.
Make safe the path.
Make safe the path.
And guide our way.
And guide our way.
For verily thou art.
For verily thou art.
The help in peril.
The help in peril.
The self-subsisting.
The self-subsisting.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah.
Ya Baha'u'llah. For those of you who are wondering what that means, that's Arabic for, O thou the glory of the most glorious.
like to say a prayer thinking of our parents. Thou seest, O Lord, our suppliant hands lifted up towards the heaven of thy favor and bounty. Grant that they may be filled with the treasures of thy munificence and bountiful favor. Forgive us and our fathers and our mothers, and fulfill whatsoever we have desired from the ocean of thy grace and divine generosity. Accept, O beloved of our hearts, all our works in thy path. Thou art verily the most powerful, the most exalted, the incomparable, the one, the forgiving, the gracious.
I just wanted to say that when I hear the prayers and what we're discussing right now, it makes me reflect on someone like Malcolm X, who for many, many years fought with the idea that he would have to fight for equality and for the end of racism, et cetera, et cetera. But he became awakened when he went to Mecca and saw that people of all races were praying together, and that awakened him in a spiritual way and in a of actually seeing it in real time. It's a big difference when you. But then when I look in this Zoom and see these great faces and these people, it really makes me feel special and good that we are unifying, even though we can't do it in person right now. We're doing it the best that we can, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David. I agree. I think in person, it would definitely be easier for all of us to hold space for each other and, listen to what's on each other's hearts. But now that everyone's so remote, it has its like unique advantages and disadvantages, because we can get to connect with people who are in a whole other state. But at the same time, we have to, be extremely intentional about how we create the right environment for people. So.
Absolutely. So I wanted to share a prayer for unity, um, unity of mankind. So, oh my God, oh my God, unite the hearts of thy servants and reveal to them thy great purpose. May they follow thy commandments and abide in thy law. Help them, O God, in their endeavor and grant them strength to serve thee. O God, leave them not to themselves, but guide their steps by the light of thy knowledge and cheer their hearts by thy love. Verily, thou art the helper and their Lord. Baha'u'llah.
All right, shall we move on to the next quote?
There was one that was very enlightening that Shane had put in. I don't remember which one it is. Do we see? Is that there?
Yeah, I think that's the next one.
Okay.
Aaron, I think you have to share your screen with us.
I can share too if there's an issue.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Sure. I'll read this. So this is from the Bible, and this is from a letter written by the Apostle John, who was one of Jesus' 12 apostles. And one of the themes of the book that John has is that God is love, and that if you want to know God, you must live a life of love. And I chose this quote because I think sometimes we lose that and we get caught up in other thinking. And I think especially for me personally, I feel like this is a topic that I'm learning a lot about, and I have a long ways to go. But reading something like this centers me and helps me focus on what's most important. So, whoever says, "I know him," but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you have had since the beginning. This old command is the message you have heard, yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in him and in you, because the darkness is passing and the true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light but hates a brother or sister is still in the darkness. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in the light, and there is nothing in them to make them stumble. But if anyone who hates a brother or sister is in the darkness and walks around in the darkness, they do not know where they are going because the darkness has blinded them.
This quote makes me think of my literal sister. Like, I love her, but sometimes we don't get along. And it's very humbling for me, because when I think that like I figured it out in terms of how to like be there for people, I'm like, oh, okay, those closest to me, I'm still having issues with. So there's so much growth there.
Francine, could you just scroll it back up to verse 6?
Yeah, this part, yes.
This is key here. Something that it's strangely, it's so obvious there, but people have found a way to ignore that and just blithely move on to other things, totally unmindful of this injunction. Whoever claims this admonition, whoever claims to live in him must live as Jesus did. That whole concept has been twisted and distorted so that people now are making up their own morality as to who Jesus is and what he exemplified.
I really like this quote because it reminds me of one that I have hanging on my wall in my office. I actually framed it. It's a quote from Martin Luther King, and it talks about returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And it's one of my favorite quotes because hate is an awful thing, and we've seen a lot of it in the past year, 2020. And for us to come together and in love is so important, like we're doing today, and holding space for each other. So important to bringing unity and healing.
Yeah. And hate is just the absence of love. It's not a force in itself, although its effects can be felt. But it's the absence of that love that's causing the effects, the injurious effects that people are suffering. That's the absence of love. Darkness is not a force in itself. It's the absence of light.
Well said.
The notion of holding space for other people is one that is talked about a lot. I am a yoga teacher, and one of the funniest things that funny and not funny, that we do is even when we think we're listening to somebody, we're not really listening. We're already planning our rebuttal before
So true.
we actually hear all of the words. So it's not just listening, it's hearing, or it's not just hearing, it's listening, whichever semantics you use, but it's also letting things sink in before you start thinking about what you're going to say. Because we're already thinking of how we're going to argue before we even finish listening sometimes.
Yeah, that seems to be a human quality. We want to assert ourselves. The tongue wants to assert itself. Your personality wants to assert itself. It's something that's been with us ever since we learned to walk upright as a human species. And it's like a genetic trait that we have to, it takes effort to eradicate that tendency. It can be moderated.
It makes me think of the idea of, the reason that I always say I'm a brother of 5. I'm the sibling, the youngest of 5 brothers, and I know that we used to walk in a room with our muscles flexed, and that's what we do. I mean, I had the smallest muscle, so mine was the, I was the smallest one of them all. But you still try to flex that muscle, and that's the same as the idea of what you just said about having a rebuttal before you even listen.
Yeah.
And if you come in the room with your muscles already flexed up, you defeat the purpose of you cause so much more conflict if you would just go in with only flexing the muscle when needed.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
I think it's sorry.
No,
It's
you go
definitely
ahead.
thank you. It's definitely a challenge. It's opposite to what we are trained as a child. You're asked in your classrooms, always raise your hand, speak up, to put your ideas through it, sometimes, and that gets, yes, that has a positive part to it too, but when that gets not controlled, then you become, we need to start listening as well. So, and it's a balance.
Yeah. The whole universe is based on balance. Everything in nature, from the tiniest atom to the clusters of galaxies, there's a balance involved, and humans need to learn their balance also. We've become imbalanced in our relationship to each other and with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what like Buddha says, choose the middle path.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for sharing, everyone. I actually have a question that just popped up that I'd like to pose. I know that we talk about how these ideas of what we think are right and wrong, we hold fast to them, and we're taught to hold fast to them since, young. Do you think prejudice works in the same way?
Yes, exactly. It's based on some idea that's been handed down without any critical evaluation. You just accept it willy-nilly, and it becomes an ingrained trait.
Beverly Tatum is an author and calls it smog in the air. Like if you're living in Los Angeles and then there's all this smog, you still have to breathe. You can't not breathe air. And
That's
prejudice is sort of this smog in the air. It's what's around us. There's no other option but to be socialized by it.
Right.
So the question would be, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, David.
No, so the question would be, if it's in the air, we cannot ignore it. Is that what the answer is with that then? because even when we don't think that we have absorbed it, we have by default?
Well, yeah, we can't ignore it. It's there, but
Mhm.
there's a way that you can create your own respirator or uh, mask, so to speak, by arming yourself with spiritual virtues and respect for fellow human beings and recognizing their nobility. Those kinds of things act as a way of shielding you from that nauseous um, those prejudices that are in the air. They're not going to evaporate on their own. It's going to take a systemic effort on the part of all humanity to clean the air. But in the meantime, you have to protect yourself.
Kelly, what author did you say that was?
Everly Tatum. She wrote Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Cafeteria, I believe.
Can you put that in the
Yeah,
chat?
sure. For sure.
Wow. Thank you.
I was going to answer the question if I may. It's interesting. I read a lot or audiobooks, and I find that it helps me kind of craft my perspective. I think my 13-year-old always makes a lot of fun of me. He's like, "Oh, Mom, what book did that come from?" But I think, I don't know if anyone read Talking with Strangers, which is Malcolm Gladwell's recent book. I'm a big fan of his, but kind of the premise of the book is the idea that like every encounter we have, whether it's just like, you go to put gas in your car and like, the encounter you have with like the person putting gas in your car, like any minor encounter you have, it's the idea that like every experience you've ever had in your life goes into the lens with which you communicate with that other person, and vice versa, right on the other side, in terms of how you view them and the language that you use and your mannerisms and everything else. So I think when you ask about prejudice, right, and then racism being a specific kind of prejudice that is based on someone's skin color, I think it's based on every experience that each individual has had in their lives, whether that's the particular experience they had in their home and how they learned to interact with other people based on who they learned how to interact with other people from, their parents, their teachers, leaders in their community, who they were exposed to. And primarily, I think in America, racism and prejudice and differences are just exaggerated everywhere, all around us, all the time. And there's just no escaping that. And I think Aaron said it, I'm paraphrasing, I forget the exact word, but I think you said like work that has to be done. It's like we would have to be so just actively deprogrammed to not have those prejudices lead our interactions and our experiences and the lens within which we see others in every encounter that we have every day, regardless of how we were raised, right? Whether it be intentional or otherwise. I think of myself and wanting to be an anti-racist person. And, I have a Black husband and I have Black children. And I think, I'm sure that I have moments, conscious and unconscious, where I don't behave in the most anti-racist way that I would like to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And if I'm guilty of that behavior as a white person with a Black husband and Black children, whom I'm, as my 13-year-old son gets older every day, I'm more and more terrified about how he's experiencing the world and how people view him and treat him and the dangers that exist. What about the people who are not doing that work to try to deprogram themselves and their communities and their lifestyle? So yeah, I'd say it's just all around us, and it's pervasive, and I don't see how to escape it.
Leslie, I also listened to the book, and I found it to be fascinating, particularly because of the concrete examples that the book does illustrate. And I often think about the work that needs to be done at the workplace in terms of training and education for us to be able to make progress moving forward. But a fascinating book, a must read, I would say. I agree with you.
Thank you, Laura.
Actually, I'm sorry. I was thinking about what Erin said at the beginning, that love is a power, and not to love is just an absence of that power. And I think about how I don't know if you guys agree with me. It's okay if you don't. But I feel like we're in a civil war, which is cutting through our own communities. And the only power that can fight against it is to love. But we all want to love with exceptions. And so we take away that power that's in our hand. We let that power slip out of our hands by loving with exceptions. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's interesting. Without exception, brings it to mind the word unconditional, and unconditional love. Because once you put conditions on your love, then you'll find some way of excusing yourself from exhibiting, showing forth love. And it just reminds me of the power of race and of bigotry and hate. Even though these are the absence of things, positive qualities, yet they have an influence that's very pernicious, and it's entrenched. And it goes back to a millennia, more than a millennia, back to the proto-racism of the Greeks and Romans, who were not malicious, but they just didn't have the wherewithal to understand the nobility and the spiritual nature of humanity the way that we today know of that quality. So it's we instinctively react negatively to people that look different than us, even though we have a sense of love within us. It's challenged when we haven't had the exposure on a regular basis, and if it's not done in an indiscriminate way, the fellowship that we should have, then we find ourselves lacking when things get a little tense. My ex-wife, who's of German background, and I were in Israel for pilgrimage, something that the Baha'is have to do or should do if they have the means. This was right after the Gulf War, and we stopped in Tel Aviv before going on, and Jerusalem before going on to Haifa, which is where the Baha'i World Center is. In Tel Aviv, we were walking down a road in an industrial area, and there were a group of Ethiopian men. I could tell that they were Ethiopian because Ethiopia recently had sent a lot of its citizens to Israel in order to seek better opportunity. And so they were just hanging out, having a conversation. As we approached them, my ex-wife shuddered, and she felt a sense of fear, even though she understands the importance of loving all humanity, and she knows the Baha'i principles, but she had that instinct within that triggered a fear, and she asked that we take a different route. And I was upset by that, but I didn't say anything about it because we were on pilgrimage.
Yeah, we all have that in us.
Even as a woman, sometimes I feel that if there's a man that I don't know or a strange man, like as soon as they approach me, my first thing is to assess their body language or, try to maintain the distance between us. And I know that comes out of like my own programming that I received like as a young person, in terms of how to avoid danger. And yeah, it is a part of like how I'm able to survive. But there's that trade-off because then you are demonizing the person as a threat in some sort of way. Like, yeah, this person might, potentially do A, B, or C, but also like as humans, we are all capable of like good or bad. But it's like our circumstances and our environment, that, pushes us either way. Um, and it's definitely a lot of unlearning that you have to do like as an adult, and you have to forgive yourself too, for holding on to these prejudices that you might have against people who don't look like you, because ultimately like we all are the same, but it's these tiny differences that society has really like driven us into abiding by, like man versus woman or black versus white, but we're all human.
Well, the challenge is that, go ahead, Sagita.
Thank you. I think I agree with everything you're saying, and I'm hopeful, since the incidents of the last year, since the results of the election, that people beyond a group like this, we all know where we stand, right? We all know where we want, the kind of people we want to be. But I think, there's a reckoning going on in this country and across much of the world. And there has been such a great, there have been so many books that have come out in the last 6 months that are a starting point. And for us to read them is a great start because, as we've talked about, some of us have these subconscious or unconscious fears that we need to reckon with within ourselves. But there's some good books out there that are a great start for us to give to the people that we know, that who may be struggling with, okay, I know that I haven't been perfect in the past and I want to learn how to do better. I know I need to do better, and how can I do better? So You Want to Talk About Race is one that I read a couple of months ago. And it was a really terrific, down-to-earth, practical book, and one that would be something that we could use to reach out to people.
So do you think that we should have a list of these books that people could put on the dock, maybe to allow us to heal or to deal with? I love the way she said the Civil War, because I agree that we're definitely, even if we don't acknowledge it, it's taking place. But
Yeah,
if
it's
we
been going on for
that's right,
hundreds of years.
But if we learn how, that's a great they say a book allows you to travel and to go many places, but it also allows you to reflect. And that's what we need to spend a lot of time learning, how to reflect on what's important versus all the nonsense.
Yeah. As I reflect on just the idea, not even the idea, the fact that, yes, I agree, it is like a civil war, it's a spiritual war, it's a war against, people's sense of logic, misinformation, and like the people who are, I guess, in favor of chaos or further competition between different groups of people. Like you see how like organized they are, and the amount, the numbers with which they come to congregate. And it makes me think of what Leslie shared, just that sense of, you know, like, am I doing enough? And is it possible to overcome that force? And it's like, sorry, I'm trying to like collect my thoughts, but like just reflecting on like Teresa's quotation too that she shared with Malcolm, was it Malcolm X or Martin Luther King?
Martin Luther King.
It was Martin Luther King that talked about how the force of darkness needs to be outweighed by the force of light, how that needs to be at the same level, if not higher or stronger than like the other force. So just like how they're organizing themselves, we have to, you know, do the same. And thank you, Sanjita, for coming up with, you know, these ways that we can, you know, think about what that looks like and plan what that looks like through educating ourselves, you know.
Right. Probably the most practical thing we can do is to gain some confidence in ourselves and our abilities to interact with people that look different than we are, to challenge ourselves to step outside of our normal sphere of comfort. And that can be traumatic for a lot of us, especially those who are not outgoing and feel confident in their identity and have that sense of self-assurance. But it's something that in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha, who's one of the central figures of the Baha'i faith, came to America, and he understood the tensions that were going on innately without even being immersed in the drama that was ongoing in America at the time. And he challenged the Baha'is because they still had this baggage of racism and vestiges of racism and prejudices. And they had two different communities operating in Chicago, which is one of the cities he visited. And he's of Black Baha'is and white Baha'is meeting separately because they hadn't learned how to come together as one. This was all new to them, this message of Baha'u'llah about the oneness of humanity. So Abdu'l-Baha told them how wonderful it is that you have two local spiritual assemblies, how much more wonderful it would be if you had only one. And he did lots of things like that across the nation. Wherever he went, he stressed the importance of the oneness of humanity. And he challenged Jim Crow when he was in DC and in New York City and wherever he went. And he challenged the Baha'is to do the same thing by engaging in indiscriminate, spontaneous fellowship. And that's something that comes with practice. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
I like that term you used, to gain confidence in our abilities to interact. That's good.
Do we have time for one more quote? I know it's getting to 3 o'clock now. Are you looking for the biblical quote, the biblical passage?
I'm not sure where it begins. Does it begin here at verse 2 or?
No, it's a little different. If we go back to the document, I think that would be sufficient.
Okay.
Yeah, it's after quote 3, Franny, the 1 Corinthians. Yeah.
It's this one?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. From 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 to 8.
So once again, this concept of love, this powerful force, is stressed and shown to have such potency and effect in the world of humanity. And this is something that's shared by all the religions. This is a common theme that God has communicated to humanity wherever they are in the world. Everyone has had their messengers, and each messenger stressed this theme of love.
Yeah, this talks about the unconditional love, right? Love without the boundaries.
Yes, right. This is the
Yeah.
unconditional.
Yeah. And this is like without that definition of boundaries, I love you, but there's no but in here. It's
Thank you for bringing that up, Chanda. The part that's highlighted that says it keeps no record of wrongs, to me, that's like the essence of unconditional love.
Yeah. Yeah, grudges can be a powerful impediment towards moving forward. When you have these lingering thoughts of hurt, and that's something that the Black Baha'is are challenged with by Abdul Baha, Shoghi Effendi, actually, who's another central figure. He says that the whites must have a responsibility to strive to eradicate the often inherent sense of superiority. And then he turns and he addresses the Black Baha'is and say that we have to overcome the suspicion that we have towards whites in order to be ready to accept their gestures of a reconciliation. Because if we hold on to grudges as a Black person, this can cause the white brother and sister to hesitate in offering their friendship. So I have to get rid of that in order to facilitate that exchange.
Yeah, it makes me think of how love just isn't, like a fluffy thing that is like incredibly passive, but it also does seek for justice as well, because justice is love, seeking, a correct way of behaving moving forward is, showing love for humanity because it's honoring humanity and keeping it safe. So it's like, we're not saying that, we should just be like, oh, it's fine if you committed all these crimes, but it's helping the person who committed the crimes or committed the abuses understand the consequences of what they do, and helping them partake in this higher education, because a lot of these people, they just operate from just like their own self, but then when they realize there's like a larger self that we all are a part of, they realize that the things they do to people comes back to them in one way or another. So
yeah, there's a saying, what goes around comes around.
Would you like to read another quote?
All right, maybe one more.
One more, yes. This one.
Maybe someone else.
I can read it. In the cluster jewels of the races, may the blacks be as sapphires and rubies, and the whites as diamonds and pearls. The composite beauty of humanity will be witnessed in their unity and blending. Talk at Home of Mrs. Andrew J. Dyer.
That's a quote from Abdu'l-Baha giving a talk at Mrs. Andrew Dyer's home in DC in 1912.
Yeah, I feel like this quote like shatters that idea that races should be segregated or living like within their own communities. Like how I was, raised. I was kind of raised in a place that was mostly, Black, Spanish, maybe Hispanic, but um, I think a lot of us on some level are used to being socialized in that way, and this is like a very like radical like vision of unity. That's the opposite of like what we've been living. It's like challenging us to, not even challenging us, but like asking us to witness the beauty that like each of us have in our uniqueness, and being able to share that with each other instead of just be by ourselves, because we have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to admire from each other.
Yeah, there's another metaphor that's used in the Baha'i writings where a group of flowers are chosen as the as a vehicle for pointing out the power of diversity. When the flowers of the garden are all of the same type, the same color, that's nice. But then compared to a garden that's multicolored, a bouquet of flowers that's multi-hued, this really gets your attention, and it's a powerful influence on the eye and the heart to see that multiplicity of colors. And you see the same thing in nature too. In the animal kingdom, the mineral kingdom. Why not the human kingdom?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody else realized this, but I have a hobby where I like to go on colorhex.com and just like create color palettes. And when I was playing around with like the red color, like you look at all the gradations and all the tones, you realize like, oh, wow, I see my skin tone. But if I lean a little over to the left, then like I see like a peachy skin tone. And then I see like an ivory skin tone. And it's like, wow. So are we all red secretly? No.
Yeah, as a geneticist, Spencer Wells at National Geographic's Genographic Project that's showing the biological commonality of all humans says that in a PBS program that he did, at the end he says we're all African under the skin, which is where the first hominids, Homo sapiens, arose. And then they just spread out throughout Africa and into Europe and the rest of the planet. And as they did, they changed colors in response to the amount of UV radiation that impacted their skin as a protection or an enabler of vitamin D production. So it's an artificial concept, but it lends beauty to the garden of humanity that we have these different colors.
That was a terrific documentary. I think it was called Journey of Man.
Yes,
yeah, it's fantastic.
I've watched it several times.
Yeah. I always laugh when people get these DNA tests done and say, well, I'm part Swedish and I'm part Irish and I'm part Ethiopian and I'm from India and I'm from here. And it's so odd because these are all man-made demarcations. This line, if you're on this side of this line, you're from here and you're on that side. So they always confuse me, like how far back are you going? Because if you keep going far enough back, we're all from the same place. So where do you draw the line? Okay, are we going back 100 years or 500 years? Because if you go back 200,000 years or even 20,000 years, it gets much less complex.
Yeah. And
if people could just see that, then there would be a lot fewer problems in the world.
The book, The Invention of Racism in Classical Antiquity by Benjamin Isaacs. There's a section, one of his chapters is entitled Superiority, Inferiority. And then he goes on to talk about imperialism and shows how these demarcations of humanity began by the early Greeks, because they like to formalize and reason what was going on around them. And they were the first to do this, but they were just hominids from Africa who happened to settle in Greece. They had no clue as to how they got there. So they assumed that they just rose up out of the soil. Autochthony, I think, is the term that's used, purity of lineage. And so it just divorces them from everyone else around them. They think that they're independent of the rest of humanity, which is a fallacy, but they didn't know any better.
I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for the dialogue.
Yes, we need to keep it up, and hopefully we'll be able to be having conversations, not just with the choir, but with others outside the choir for now.
Yeah, this was definitely.
Aaron, I just wanted to make
Go ahead.
wanted to make a quick comment. I really have enjoyed today's program so much, and you know, so enlightening. But I feel that we still have a lot of work to do, and as long as we do our best, God will do the rest.
Yeah, well said.
I just wanted to add, we are so lucky in New Providence to have to have Teresa Gazaway as our police chief. I mean, you are hopefully starting a trend, and I mean, it just makes my heart swell that we have someone like you to lead our police department, because that's where change happens. I mean, it happens in a lot of places on a lot of levels, but this is where one of the areas that we know we need to have a sea change in mentality and behavior. And I'm so grateful that we have you.
Don't make me get all emotional now. It's truly my honor. It is truly my honor and privilege to lead the police department, and the decisions that I make, are very thoughtful decisions in the training that I make sure that my officers receive, and the things that I talk about with them about the importance of treating everyone equally, about the importance of being respectful to everyone that you come into contact with. It's something that I truly value, and I make sure that I instill in all my officers, and we talk about on a regular basis. It's very important, like, to talk as we're talking today. You know, the conversations need to happen everywhere, and I take it to heart, and I make sure I fulfill my responsibility in instilling the values in the officers.
Leslie, is that Jason?
Jordan.
Is Jordan?
Yeah.
Sorry. What's up?
Not too much. Just tuning in at the end. I think what you said about the flowers, that was really powerful.
Yeah, that's a metaphor I like to use because it's just really gets right to the point, the visual cue.
I really liked it, yeah.
And Jude, who's less.
Was that Jude? Okay, Jude. All right.
Less friendly.
Less
friendly.
Oh, he's still young. This was amazing conversation. I think, 2021 is it's really starting well. And I wanted to kind of go back into something what we said earlier, that reprogramming, right? maybe in upcoming, gathering, we can probably talk about as a community, what can we do as a reprogramming? Because each of us is biased, from different ways, so, not the same way, but what can we do as a reprogramming, right? In small way. Maybe that's something that we need to start, we can think about it.
Yeah, and here's a thought, perhaps a final thought in the interim, is to have a conversation with people that are difficult, to have that conversation centered around some spiritual concepts, attributes, without talking about the harsher things of life, so as to soften the hearts of those who are entrenched in a particular point of view. You have to use a different style of communication to open up the channels of dialogue. So that's another skill.
Definitely. Thank you.
All right. I guess that about wraps it up for now. What do you think, Janda?
No, I mean, I think this is a really important conversation, and I think for today we can probably quote. I think we covered 4 quotes, right? The rest of quotes we can probably cover it in the next meeting. The Google Docs is available to anyone and anybody who, as the days go by, and then if you see a quote that is really strikes you, please copy paste or write it down in that Google Docs. I think that it would be a very valuable resource to go for the upcoming gatherings. And then the other one, I think, we talked about the list of books, right? We want to add those in the same document.
In the Google Doc,
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Shanda, in reference to the reading list, currently I am working with the New Providence librarian, I should say, to compile a list of reading material in observance, I am going to say, of Black History Month. But I know that they are very eager to help in many ways, so maybe I can help them to help us compile of related reading material, and then I can certainly share it with the group. I'm speaking with them again on Tuesday morning, so I can request that of them as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that definitely works, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Right, exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a host of books that are intriguing and insightful from my perspective. I'll add them to the Google Doc to share with you, Laura, and anyone else to share with librarians. Because the more we read about these things, the more it starts to seem just a natural progression that humans have been undergoing, and we're trying to figure out how to emerge into the age of maturity, and we haven't figured it out yet. But we have that potential now that didn't exist during the time of Jesus, Muhammad, and Buddha, and whatnot. The people just weren't ready to have the conversation that we're having now, and that's natural. That's the way human evolution goes.
And another book to think, this has been a great conversation that I really enjoyed hearing everyone, and the idea of holding space. Recently I read the book Cast, and probably other people have read it too. Isabel Wilkerson. You familiar? Mm-hmm. It's really excellent. And so next Sunday evening, I'm going to host a discussion based on the book and spiritual principles. For anyone who's interested.
Yeah, send a Zoom link out to.
Yeah, I would love to have people participate too, since we're all thinking about it and trying to move forward in our,
Yeah, Rico, I can forward it to the the folks online.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be helpful. so we know what's going on and we can dial in whenever we have the opportunity, time-wise.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Any last minute thoughts or anything? Because I want to be timely. I know in the previous meeting we have always gone over, but this time it was set to 3:30, and then I do want to respect everybody's time.
I have one thing I just want to add really quickly. Sorry, I haven't talked much, but for our diversity club, we are kind of starting a series that's like diversity in the blank. So like we did diversity in the arts, and we had like New Providence alumni, like their experience in like musical theater or art programs. So if anybody is in like STEM, we'd love to do diversity in STEM and wants to come talk to a bunch of high schoolers, or diversity in sports, any major career in medicine and police work, education, whatever you want. We would love to have you. So just putting that out there. Yeah. That's it.
Awesome.
Ali, I can help out. You can put me down. So my background is in pharmaceutical. I'm in STEM.
Oh, awesome. Here, I have your phone number so I can reach out to you, but thank you so much.
If you have my email, Al, you can email me. We can work on something together.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you everyone for joining in today. And we'll continue this conversation in 2 weeks. And please see your inbox for the meeting invitation. And I'll ask Sunil to change it to 2021 for the passcode.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sunil.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you
you all.
for letting me join. Thank you all. Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Be
Bye.
safe.
Take care, everybody.